Lewis Hamilton doesn't just drive smoothly, he uses the throttle differently. And according to telemetry data, that difference might be one of the biggest hidden reasons behind his long-run pace and race-winning consistency. But here's the first question you need to think about. If every Formula One driver has the same throttle pedal, if every car has nearly identical electronic control systems, and if teams can see throttle traces down to thousandths of a second, why do Lewis Hamilton's throttle graphs still look different from almost everyone else? And here's an even bigger mystery we'll answer later. Is Hamilton fast because he uses the throttle this way, or did Mercedes build cars that reward his throttle technique? Because once you understand how Hamilton actually applies power and how it affects rear grip, tyre temperature and traction, you'll realize throttle control isn't just about acceleration, it's about controlling the entire car. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why telemetry engineers often say the fastest drivers are not the ones who hit 100% throttle first, they're the ones who reach 100% throttle the smartest way. Most fans imagine throttle control as something simple. You exit the corner and push the pedal down. The faster you get to full throttle, the faster you accelerate. But Formula One doesn't work that way. Modern hybrid power units produce enormous torque at low speeds. The MQK alone can deliver around 120 kilowatts of electrical power instantly, roughly 160 horsepower, on top of the internal combustion engine. That torque arrives immediately. There is no waiting for revs to build the way drivers did in older, naturally aspirated eras. If a driver applies throttle too aggressively, the rear tires slide. Sliding creates heat. Heat destroys grip. Grip loss slows acceleration. So pushing harder can actually make you slower. Lewis Hamilton's telemetry traces often show something unusual. Instead of a sharp line rising quickly to full throttle, his throttle trace tends to look like a smooth curve. It builds gradually. Sometimes it pauses briefly around 60 or 70% before reaching 100%. And here's the key point. That pause is not hesitation, it's grip synchronization. Hamilton applies torque at the exact rate that rear grip increases. As the car straightens and downforce builds with speed, he feeds in more power. That synchronization prevents wheel spin while maximizing acceleration. Now here's the second question we need to answer. If Hamilton uses throttle more gradually, why is he still faster on exit? Because theoretically, slower throttle application should mean slower acceleration. The answer is tire slip ratio. Every racing tire produces maximum traction at a specific slip ratio, usually around 5 to 10% depending on load and compound. Too little slip and the tire isn't using its full potential. Too much slip and grip falls rapidly. Hamilton consistently operates near optimal slip ratio. Other drivers often exceed it briefly. Those brief excess slip moments reduce average acceleration. Hamilton's smoother curve produces higher average traction even if peak throttle comes slightly later. Over a single corner, the difference looks tiny. Over a lap, it becomes measurable. Over a race distance, it becomes decisive. Now here's something even more interesting. Throttle control affects tire temperature more than most fans realize. Rear tires heat rapidly under acceleration. Surface temperatures can spike within seconds if slip increases. If surface temperature exceeds optimal range, typically around 100 to 110 degrees Celsius depending on compound, grip drops quickly. Hamilton's progressive throttle keeps surface temperature stable. Stable surface temperature protects carcass temperature. Stable carcass temperature preserves long-run performance. This connects directly to tire management. Which brings us to another question we introduced earlier. Did Hamilton's tire management make his throttle control effective, or did throttle control make his tire management possible? The answer is both. Tire management and throttle control are inseparable. Rear tire degradation often comes from repeated micro wheel spin events. Even small slip events accumulate heat. Hamilton minimizes those micro events. Telemetry engineers sometimes look at throttle oscillation frequency, how often throttle input changes rapidly. Hamilton's oscillation frequency is often lower than rivals in race conditions. Lower oscillation means fewer grip shocks. Fewer shocks mean lower heat spikes. Lower heat spikes means slower degradation. But here's where things get even deeper. Throttle control doesn't just influence tires. It influences stability. When torque increases suddenly, the rear suspension compresses. Weight shifts rearward. If torque spikes exceed grip, the rear slides. That slide forces steering corrections. Steering corrections increase slip angle. Slip angle increases temperature. Hamilton's smooth throttle avoids that cascade. The car stays balanced. And balance means confidence. Now here's the next curiosity question. If Hamilton's throttle technique is so effective, why don't teams simply program throttle maps to replicate it automatically? Because throttle control isn't just electronics, it's timing. Drivers constantly adjust throttle based on steering angle, yaw angle, surface grip, tire temperature, and energy deployment mode. No electronic map can perfectly predict those conditions. The driver must feel them. Hamilton's sensitivity to rear grip is exceptional. Engineers often mention how accurately he reports traction levels over team radio. That feedback allows setup changes that complement his style. And this leads us to the next big question. Is Hamilton's throttle technique still relevant in modern Formula One? Or was it mainly an advantage during Mercedes' dominant years? Because critics often argue that Mercedes' power units and chassis stability allowed Hamilton to look better than others. But telemetry comparisons, even in less competitive seasons, still show similar throttle behavior. The style remained, only the results changed. Now let's bring this forward to 2026. Because this is where things get fascinating. The 2026 regulations dramatically increase electrical power contribution. Nearly half the total output will come from electric deployment. Electric torque is instantaneous. That makes throttle modulation even more critical. Without the MGU-H smoothing turbo response, torque delivery characteristics will change again. Drivers will need even finer control over exit traction. This should favor drivers with precise throttle modulation. But there's another side. Cars are targeted to be lighter. Lower weight reduces tire load, reduced load reduces degradation. If degradation falls significantly, the advantage of careful throttle management may shrink. So here's the final big question. Will the 2026 era reward Hamilton's throttle precision? Or make it less important than before? Because if electric torque spikes increase traction sensitivity, throttle control becomes more important. But if tire degradation decreases, the advantage narrows. That tension will define part of the next era. And maybe the most interesting part of this entire topic is this. Throttle control isn't visible. Fans see overtakes. Fans see pole laps. Fans see crashes. But throttle traces live in telemetry screens inside engineering rooms. That's where some of the biggest performance differences hide. So now I want to hear from you. If telemetry shows Lewis Hamilton applies throttle differently, if engineers can measure the difference, if teams study the data constantly, why do most drivers still struggle to replicate his traction consistency? Is it talent, experience, or instinct? Comment below. Is Lewis Hamilton's throttle control one of the biggest hidden advantages in Formula One history? And if you enjoy deep technical breakdowns like this, subscribe now, because next we're breaking down which driving styles will benefit most from the 2026 active aero changes. Because Formula One speed isn't just about going flat out, sometimes it's about how you get there.